So the final talk that we have today is going to be from Gilbert from Lyft. Jen was at our inaugural first TechKnowCon annual in 2018 at LinkedIn, yes, and it was a great talk. So I'm looking forward to hearing how Lyft is moving the classroom experience online, and not just by moving what happens in a classroom online, but rethinking the entire experience. So with that, Jen, take it away, please.
Oops, I'm getting updates and stuff now. Hopefully people can see my screen. Can you tell I am kind of new to presenting on Zoom? All right, can everyone see okay? I'm seeing a few thumbs up. It seems like we're all right. Okay. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about this, especially in the context of what I've already been hearing, mainly because I'm sort of ready to start thinking about the next step. So it's like we've all survived this transition to virtual. Now what? Like, what does it mean? So I'm not going to belabor my problem statement, I think mainly because you're very familiar with it already in your own lives, painfully so probably. But essentially, Lyft needs to offer remote onboarding indefinitely. So as happy as I am with our transition, we did it quickly, we delivered a solid experience. I'm proud that we survived that, kind of similar to how other people had that experience. This is changing now. Like, this is our identity. This is becoming what my team does. So if we're saying for the long term, this is where we live now, I want to raise the bar a little bit. So I want this to be the best product we've ever made. So this is kind of a bold statement. I feel like people tend to think about remote as like this consolation prize where it's like, it's not a classroom, but it's the best we can do. And I want to say, like, I want it to be the ideal classroom. I don't want it to be a consolation prize. So point of the talk today is really just to walk you through how I'm thinking about that and how my team is working to deliver those experiences, and give you a little bit of a demo as well as to what this could look like. Although the emphasis is not really on the tools, I think you could apply these principles with a lot of different tools. So first, just in case you're unfamiliar, a skeuomorph is a digital interface designed to mimic its real world counterpart. So really examples from the real world that work very well. Your recycle bin, it's pretending to be a trash can. It's not, but it's doing a good job. And the Apple Watch, which is not a watch at all. It's actually a little computer that's strapped to your wrist, but it's convincing. I believe that that's a watch. So this is skeuomorphism. It'll make sense in a minute, I promise, why I care about this. But historically, early software relied much more heavily on skeuomorphism. Some of you may remember, some of you may not, but this was everywhere. So when software kind of was new, we didn't really know what to do with it. And so we just said, okay, let's just like take real world things and make them digital things and kind of translate them. And it got weird. Like, it was just like, this is a little bit awkward, to be honest. And sometimes they would take this cozy, beloved thing and they would put it online, and it would become this like uncanny, sterile experience in ways that are hard to explain, but it's just kind of what happens. And sometimes it was just hostile. I mean, there were times that using this software was like impossible compared to what it would be like using it in real life. So it could kind of be awkward and uncomfortable. So speaking of awkward and uncomfortable, I think that's where we all live now. I think that remote learning is often skeuomorphic. We often say, how can my video conference imitate a live classroom? And the reason we do that is that we're new and this is your first instinct, and this is like where you start. I think it's a perfectly reasonable place to start. I'm just ready to move on from that and say, okay, let's like really think through this, mainly because as we saw with early software, imitation is not a quality. That's not how it works. You can translate it as directly as you want, but when you change mediums, things change. An example that's already come up in some of the other presentations is open discussion. Some people said, we just don't do it. It's so hard to do. So in a classroom, maybe it's a little awkward at first, but you can build momentum, especially with a good facilitator. People can laugh when someone says something. You know, there's like not much friction to speak up, at least once people get a little bit more comfortable. You could do the exact same thing in a remote environment and it is not good at all. So the friction to speak up is really high. The group is muted, so you're just speaking into the void. I don't think we need more existentialism right now. And then momentum actually just breaks down. Anytime you get momentum, people start cutting each other off and the timing's awkward. And it actually is bad when you get momentum, which is not a good sign, right? So, okay, forget skeuomorphism. How do we actually design for the medium? That's what I'm asking. You know, this is the question that I want to re-examine. So you have to start with your goals. Instead of saying our goal is to imitate a classroom, you need to actually try to solve the same problems the classroom was trying to solve in the new medium. I don't think the goal will surprise you. I think the high level goal is that they're engaged, right? They're contemplating these concepts and they're remembering these concepts. This leads to a few supporting goals that I'm not going to read to you because this is a very short talk and I don't think they will surprise you. It's essentially they need to be accountable and need to enjoy it. I think both of those things need to be true for an experience to really be a good learning experience. So once you organize it this way, I think something really important jumps out, which is how often the word each shows up. If we're saying, let's find a way to not beg people to pay attention. Let's make them indistractable. Like, let's make it so they just have to do this and they want to do this. This is a pretty big ask in terms of how you approach this from a design perspective. So what does it look like? I think the main conclusion was what we actually need to mimic is a conversation, not a classroom. There's a subtle difference there of saying, I want to feel as a facilitator like I'm having a conversation with every single human and it's a meaningful conversation. And I want to have people having those conversations offline as well, or in groups or in different formats. The good news is this is where remote has a huge advantage, is that we can use tooling to simultaneously casually converse with every student. So what does this design come out to look like? We're still working on this, so there's a little bit of an asterisk here, but our live sessions, 15 to 45 minutes, nothing longer than that. No real traditional presentation, but this is about as close of an analog as we get to a traditional presentation. There's a cycle of accountability, 5 to 10 minutes of giving a key concept, maybe illustrating something, you know, whatever you need to do to give them the mental model they need. And then a live activity for every student. Every student completes it. This is pretty key. The other thing that's pretty key, which I'll show in the demo, is that it's not a multiple choice question. It's not an easy engagement. It's actually something that's very personal to them, where not everyone is going to have the same answer. And that's actually what we want to see. So we move into group work. This is optional. We don't need to use this every time we go through this cycle, but sometimes it's useful, especially in the beginning, to say, let's build a support network. I want people I can reach out to. And then we go to solo work. So this is where my team really differs from what I typically see in approaches. Our onboarding process is 90% solo work. I think with remote, it's actually going to go more to like 70% solo work because I think people get a little more lonely. So we want to support that. But we place them in these scenarios and we use storytelling, and I'll show you how this works, to just say, do the job that you came here to do. But we're going to give you the tools, but like we're going to put you through a story and you're going to do the job that you want to practice doing. So the way this connects to the live session, to sort of repeat the cycle, is that this is only 2 or 3 hours, if that. And there's this idea of, hey, we'll see you back at the next live session when we talk about how that went. So there's not this like, I'm going to trail off, I'm going to abandon it. I know I'm accountable. I know as a student that I'm going to be expected to have this completed by the live session. So then it loops right back around again. So we might go through this 2 to 3 times a day. We might do it in the morning to just say hello to everyone. And then maybe after lunch, it's nice to come back together in a live session. So it's a cycle. 2 things I really like about this. One, it works for every possible scenario. I don't want to do more onboarding conversions. I like the fact that this actually runs just fine and pretty well, whether you have people live, remote, or in some sort of mixed environment. The other thing, and this loops back to my design goals, is saying, no matter what stage we're in, every student has expectations on them, and those expectations are not choose from a multiple choice question. Those expectations are, I want you to think about this content, and I have you responsible every 5 to 10 minutes of understanding what I just said and applying it in a way that I can see as a facilitator. Okay, lofty goals. What does this actually look like in a delivery example? I think it's important to kind of connect this for you. So pretend I gave you a 10-minute presentation on Lyft's key metrics. I won't actually subject you to that. I'm not that cruel, but you can pretend that you just received that. I can use something like Mentimeter. It doesn't have to be Mentimeter. There's a million tools that will do this, to ask an open-ended question that actually really forces that contemplation. So give me an example of how your work relates to Lyft's key business metrics. What I really want is then just to think about or remember the metrics, but as long as they're thinking about it and applying it, that's probably good enough for the level of bar we have for professional adults who generally are getting paid to be there, and we hired them for a reason. So down here, you can see how many answers you've gotten, and you can see that results are hidden. So if you know how many people you have, you just wait until they've all answered, and then you can reveal the answers. This lets everyone kind of answer at the same time, and it lets you lead the conversation, because then you can scroll through, you can call out some things, you can engage people a little bit more, but it doesn't have that uncomfortable sort of popcorn feeling. So, okay, we maybe do this a few times. This is that live cycle. Then we can move into the group challenge. And because Mentimeter pushes right to their screen, you could just give them the URL. It's a really easy transition. I'm gonna escape out of here because I actually, oops, my shameless bragging is too early. You don't want that yet. I haven't earned it yet. So if I give them this link, they can go to our platform. So this is Qualtrics. It's not our proprietary platform. It's actually a survey platform. We like it because it's clean and simple and not exhausting, which I think is really important when you're working through like online content. I think it's tiring to just, keep working through these LMSs and sort of complicated things. So we try to make it really simple. So in terms of how the group is talking to each other, it might be Slack, it might be Zoom, it doesn't really matter. You have some options there. One person submits on behalf of the group, so I can say, hey, I'll submit, and then I'm filling this thing out. And this is where we're making sure everyone has something to say, everyone contributes, no lurkers allowed. We're designing challenges to make sure people are engaged. Or they can say, actually, someone else is going to, and then they don't have to type that out. So we're avoiding that redundancy using that conditional survey logic. No programming required, by the way. Qualtrics is pretty much point and click. So then we move into the solo challenges. I'm obviously skipping a lot of login instruction-y type stuff for the sake of time. This is where storytelling makes us really kind of weirdos in the learning world, I found. I think we take it really seriously. So we're saying, okay, this is a film noir theme, and we start out, they don't have no idea what's going on. We just say, of all the workshops and all the tech companies, you had to walk into ours. They're kind of just like, okay, but there's a pattern of clicking to move the story forward. This essentially means there is no way to sit back and not pay attention. If you don't click, it doesn't move. So you kind of have to consider things and stay engaged. I'm skipping the challenges for the most part because I don't think you need to see a demo of that, but one challenge I just skipped in this demo is like drawing Lyft data architecture. So we give them a big long text description and they make us a drawing and upload it. So then we say, okay, you've got the job. And they say, what job? And we say, you are the data detective. You're going to go through a bunch of data tables. You're going to visualize some data. You're going to run some SQL queries. And they seem less than enthused, but that's fine. So there's this idea of the student as a character as well, which can be really fun to play with. And they forgive us for that, believe it or not, for putting words in their mouths. They tend to think it's pretty funny most of the time. So if they're beginning that detective career, I'm going to show you one challenge in particular. You get your first case, somebody brings in a safe that is locked and you need to unlock it. So you look at the safe lock a little more closely and surprise, it's just a matching exercise for our biggest data sources. And you have your data platform docs where you can review that. So this is where I make sure I can pass this, no pressure, but there's not really a way around it if I don't pass it. So you see the safe is clicking. So as they're working, they're getting that feedback. We don't want them to get too frustrated. So usually we're trying to make sure that it's not, too difficult since they're kind of on their own, but difficult enough that they're responsible for understanding the information. Okay, so I've unlocked the safe, and when I unlock the safe, I get a safe full of Lyft gift cards, which what could be more rewarding than that? So the other theme is that we often have a reward at the end of each page. It's that little dopamine hit that you need to kind of keep going when you're in a narrative-driven, self-paced sort of challenge. So, okay, that is solved. And then there would be more. That module is actually like 90 minutes long as they go through and visualize SQL queries and things like that. But we collect feedback on whether it's engaging and whether they feel equipped. They can give us some information. I'm just going to drop an X and they can hit next. So the other example I wanted to show you, this is just like a hard cut to a totally different section that they work on only if they're in design. So one of the advantages of solo work is that people can work on different things, and that's fine, which is really nice. And they're still all working on something together, sort of at the same time. So this is for design. We want them to learn about mission, structure, processes, roles, principles. Again, this module is actually more like 90 minutes long. But when I'm showing you, the story is very simple. And we skipped the story page, but we set them up to say, your whole team is gone, their flight got canceled, they were accepting a big design award in Paris, and it's your first day and you have to interview someone who's coming in who they can't cancel. And so you have to explain how great Lyft design is, even though you just got here and you're trying to pretend that you didn't just get here. And so the question that gets asked is basically what we want them to answer. So they're talking to the candidate, they're having a conversation with the candidate, and you say, you know, let me tell you why this mission resonates with me. So they can click and have that conversation as if they're sitting there with the candidate. And of course, our candidate conveniently wants to know, you know, all about our quality principles and all kinds of stuff. Sometimes the veneer is thin, but I think people appreciate it anyway. And then there's the prize at the end. I promised you, there's always a prize. So the story is that you panicked and you gathered everything pink from all of your coworkers' desks as swag to hand out as you're trying to fake this interview process. And so you say, I almost forgot, this is for you. And you give them this jacket as swag, and they are incredibly impressed because they usually just get a keychain or something. So you're slowly winning this candidate over. And that's kind of the end of that particular one. Other question formats that I'm not showing you that we do use sometimes pretty lightly is like validated text. So if you need them to get something right, you can validate. We try not to do that. I don't think it's that interesting, but sometimes you need to make sure they understand. And then acknowledging a set of items. So we might say, click into this doc. We know it's big and messy and crazy, but be mindful of these 5 things as you read it and notice this about this. And it just kind of draws them to these concepts and makes them consider each one. So the ones I want you to consider is that actually after each page, Qualtrics can send a student's answers to a monitoring sheet. The facilitator can see those as they go, so they can engage individually as needed. And the facilitator can also use everyone's answers to inspire the conversation the next live session. So we're connecting these things. We just have this continual engagement of people driving their own learning in a way that holds them really accountable. And we always hand out these prizes. So the full swag set for the candidate is pretty entertaining. And then there are other stories where they gradually collect trophies. So we tell them they love trophies, and they either empty trophy shelf in the beginning and they say, I'm gonna fill this up. And then they do a bunch of challenges and get a lot of trophies. So many trophies, in fact, that their wolf chalice does not actually fit, and they have to decide to put it on the mantle instead. And then we connect back to the live session. So hey, up next, this live session, here's a bunch of stuff you can study in the meantime that's a little bit looser. At least you feel like you're still making good use of your time, or you can just take a break if you like. This is like a little bit more of a flexible format. At the end of the live session, the facilitator will give you the password to continue. So we can keep them in the same context. They can come back to it and leave it open in a tab. So in terms of what this has looked like so far, we have implemented the solo challenges pretty heavily. We have not done as much with the live and group work yet. It's a little bit lighter. We're still playing with it. But in terms of even just the solo challenges, people have really enjoyed it. So somebody said, I may have enjoyed this more than in person, which is like what I'm going for. So I was excited to hear that. And somebody else said, this is without exaggeration, the best onboarding experience I've ever had. Really enjoyed the engaging and comprehensive track. So this is what I want. I think I don't want people to say, you did the best you could. I want them to say that was the best. And that's just a very different conversation. And I think it requires us to re-examine some things. So yeah, that is all I have for you. I hope that was helpful.
Cool, thanks, Jen. This was super interesting. So Katie was asking a similar question I had. It seems like you are taking this tool, Qualtrics, that was really meant for a different purpose, like surveying, and you hacked it to use it for learning, for an online experience where you kind of like laid over a story narrative over a number of questions and created this like really interesting, engaging experience over that, what do you call it, live group solo loop. Keeping every video game has to keep the players in the loop, so you got your loop. That's important. So is there any do you use Qualtrics exclusively? Is that in place of your LMS? Do you have any APIs, anything like that? I think that was Katie's question. And
we do on our team. The tech learning team uses Qualtrics exclusively. There are other LMSs in use at Lyft that we can use if we want to publish talks, which is a little bit different. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to publish like a video in Qualtrics. We just don't use that much video. So it ends up, we can embed it if we need to. And yeah, we use Qualtrics because it's so fast to build with. Unlike LMSs where it takes 9 clicks to build a quiz. I love LMSs, they have their uses, but we have to move so fast to keep up with Lyft's changing landscape all the time, that the speed of Qualtrics is just unreal. We acquired a company and we needed a week of onboarding, and I built it almost from scratch in 2 weeks in Qualtrics, and it was a week of completely solo work. So it's just wouldn't have been possible, I think, in a slower platform, and actually wasn't possible in Survey Gizmo, which is what we used to use before we moved to Qualtrics. And yeah, we use survey software essentially because, I hate to say it, but there's more money in marketing than in learning, and survey software is usually pretty good. We have not, there's very little code involved. The only code we needed to use was to hide the next button until we wanted to show it to them. That's like a little bit of JavaScript. Everything else, I have the back end here. Everything else can be set up. You know, you can set up conditions, you can set up whatever you want. You can set up entire chunks to only show to certain people based on their answers. It's just really easy to use.
Got it. And so John is asking, you use the same onboarding for engineers as well, or is this just sort of like for general population?
This is for everyone. So we use this for everyone who's in a technical role, which is engineers, TPMs, product designers, a lot of different people. And then our engineers do an additional week of onboarding that has some of these components, but goes more into like a code lab style. So it's a little bit less polished. I don't think most engineers, and I say this as an engineer, a lot of them don't want to click next 57 times to like do a code lab. So it's a little bit different. We use Google Docs, and we're looking at Google Code Labs as well for that. But sort of a similar idea where we just keep asking you questions. We just keep saying, even our code labs have a lot of imaginary components to them of saying, you're trying to complete this project on a deadline. You know, how are you going to handle it?
Got it. And does this tie back into, like, do you care about this data tying back into, say, LMS or some other place where you store all this, or is that not important?
It's not important to us right now. There is a world where it is. So I'm trying to get to a point where attendance is this like universal idea at Lyft, where we can track which employee attended which session, and no matter who's offering it, no matter what team it comes from. I think it's valuable for managers. I'd love to see us get there. It's a conversation we're having. We're just not quite there yet. So we manage our own attendance data. And like I said, Qualtrics is able to push a webhook kind of anytime. And so it ships the data to us and we collect it. So we, as a team, manage our own data, but I would love to see it be more Lyft-wide.
Got it. And I think Andrew was asking a question about exploring more traditional authoring tools, like for learning, or did you also find them too slow compared to Qualtrics?
Usually they've been too slow. I do think I need to revisit that. I think that they've gotten better, and my experience is a couple years old, and so I've seen a lot of sort of enhanced docs sort of things like Coda, like things where it is lightweight and it feels like you could build fast, but it still gives you that interaction piece that we're looking for.
Cool. Well, thanks, Jen. That was super insightful as always. I love how you innovate with tooling and experiences. So I love seeing how you're thinking about that in the new work from home world order.